All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us today for this meeting. And as I mentioned, I'd like for this to be more of a meeting format versus a webinar in which I'm speaking to you using slides. Although these slides are here for for your note-taking purposes and for refreshers, because we will be covering a lot of material. It may be only 6 months in our real calendar, but I think in AI years, it feels more like it's been about a decade, because there's just so much to keep up. It's in this field, and just even this segment of this field, when we're talking specifically generative AI and large language models. Every week there is some significant signal that I need to pay attention to, that I need to pick up to understand this space, not only from the standpoint of how AI is going to impact my clients' industries, but also how AI is going to impact my work, our work in CI, in research and analysis. So it's been very busy times, and some of you have known this too as well, because we've had conversations about this. So with this, I am going to be more focused on generative AI, although I will be talking about some other aspects of AI as well, because we really can't be thinking about AI in a very siloed fashion. But the focus here on generative AI is simply because there have been so many developments here. And this is an area of focus. Even folks in other aspects of AI are adopting generative AI and merging that with what they do. So it's particularly important, that we focus this. And this is just a catch-up session. So hopefully we'll have more time in the future to talk about other developments along the way. I hope that this will be really something that we'll do on a regular basis. Say, maybe I think quarterly might be reasonable, but I'm open to feedback. So I'd like to focus, more on where things are right now. In particular, also the various types of key changes that have occurred since the pivotal month of March. And then let's take a look at how AI is impacting CI and how it matters, not necessarily simply how people are practicing. That's certainly one piece, but also how we could be practicing adopting AI for CI, because I know that there's a lot of confusion here as well. And I think most of you understand too that not even experts have all the answers. So this is why it's so important to have this collective approach as opposed to some kind of authority, speaking, because there really is, I think, no such thing in this space. It's all hive now, and we've got to work together. Then we've got recommendations, some approaches that we can take, and then let's launch into some questions and discussions. And as I said, there's a lot to cover, and so it may feel like I am touching on a lot of things, and maybe some things will be moving rather quickly. But I've tried to codify as much as I can on these slides so that they're not necessarily pretty, but informative. And then hopefully we'll have subsequent conversations about this too, so we can drill down. So with this, let's get started on the generative AI, and let's talk about what the landscape is. And I think most of you well understand, because we've been living it, this rush of claims and all the various folks who are saying that they are, now AI enabled or an AI company, especially on the vendor side. And so it's creating a lot of hype, a lot of noise. And it's very, very hard for many of us to just try to separate what matters with, all that other stuff. Now, those of us who have lived through the dot-com boom, we're probably getting some traumatic flashbacks to it. And I think that's, I think not an unreasonable response to all of this. But I also feel too that there are significant lessons that we can learn from this. And if you haven't lived through the dot-com boom, I would urge you to talk to people who have, because there are some really interesting observations, war stories, perspectives that still lend itself to this, as it lends itself to any type of hype cycle, but also any type of significant technological transformation as we are here. And I mentioned in the CI Fellows March webinar, and I was privileged to be a part of the panel that was moderated by JP Radicek, and I was on the panel with August Jackson and Craig McHenry. And we talked about, a lot of what we're seeing right now. And that really was just the start of what our discussions were publicly in the CI fellow space. But this is something that we really need to be doing on an ongoing basis to also help penetrate the hype and the noise, using other people as our eyes and ears, those who are paying attention, not just in the CI space, but across spaces that we occupy, various industries, functional areas, and so forth. But we're all steeped in uncertainty right now. So this is novel technology. So we're all struggling with, well, yeah, we hear about it a lot. We're actually inundated with it. But many of us are still trying to struggle with, what is this? Not just definitionally, but also what this is in terms of its impact and significance. Because this is promising to be disruptive. It already is in some spaces. And we're seeing certainly, no small amounts of effects, in some spaces more than others, but certainly it's a part of an ongoing evolution that, from which we don't see an end. Because this will simply be building on itself, and more technological innovations will simply build on that, and might even propel that. And I won't even get into, when we finally, get to nano and what this might, not nano, when we finally, get into, more robust, types of processing, and what this might do. And also, this changes the rules of engagement. And that's something that we all have to understand as CI practitioners, looking at industries, trying to understand competition, trying to understand the macro environment. We understand that rules are changing socially in terms of government policy. We're seeing, some early moves in that, but it's also going to change the rules of play within industry as well. And so that's something that we have to pay attention to as practitioners. And then, of course, the various types of risks that are presented here, and not just in terms of how we produce CI, but also the risks of sometimes even not taking certain types of action. Say some people who might try to time this, in terms of, hey, I'm really going to wait and see, and they hold back too long. They're losing precious time, because AI, you have a temporal advantage, for folks who have the resources to be able to adopt this early, and to be able to experiment, be able to leverage and build data and continue to build on data. So lots of uncertainty. And so the other thing we have to understand too is that we are dealing with a landscape. And so this is a landscape that First Mark has created and updates every year. So the latest update was earlier part of this year. So some of this has already changed because of various types of new players, and it's changing in shape. But we need to understand that we don't have to master all of this. This is just to give us a sense of scale and scope. But you can see that this is broken down, into categories. And I've highlighted here in yellow, one category here, which is, analytics with all its, attendant subcategories. And so if this is a particular area of interest, you drill down into these areas. And that's particularly important, to keep in mind. Now, some of you may have already seen me use this landscape in some early warning discussions and workshops that I've run. We're not going to go into that today. This is really just to illustrate just the lay of the land, so to speak, as opposed to how we're going to use this. But this may seem familiar to you. And so here is another category that I've pulled out here, and so on and so forth, as you can see. And you'll also notice too that there may be some overlap in some of these players and some of these categories, because they occupy multiple ones. So that also means that when we're paying attention to signals, and especially as these major players, are shaping this landscape, we need to pay attention more than one space. And so that's another very important sort of organizing principle, right, for the way that we approach signals collection and early warning. And so many of you are familiar with, with these players here. So with all of this, again, it's just to underscore, see, there's the overlap as well. Where you've got some of the same players occupying different subcategories or even categories. So how do we make more sense of this? Because we can't be tracking that map. And I certainly don't track that entire map either. I use others as my eyes and ears, but I also prioritize in particular categories that I feel that I need to pay attention to. So one of the ways that I approach this is what you see here, which is just organizing some of these players in the ways that I engage with them and the ways that most of us will be engaging with them. So starting at the bottom where you have the large language models and platforms. And by the way, you are going to see some acronyms and so on. So I'm assuming that most of you already know some of this, but if you don't, please ping me, post in the chat, and I can clarify, but I am going to assume that you understand some of the basic concepts anyway. And so large language models and platforms, examples are at the bottom there. And so these are the folks who develop these models on which everything else is going to sit. And so so these platforms oftentimes, well, nowadays, are also being married with various types of cloud and enterprise platforms, the next layer up that you see. And so some of these are the developers of commercial open source LLMs. So you see here Google. So Google developed Palm, which informs Bard, but they also have cloud, and they recently announced Vertex AI, which is going to compete with Microsoft, Azure and Copilot, in creating enterprise level AI that's going to harness enterprise data and be able to connect various types of functions and workflows within the enterprise. And so you can see how this layer sits on top of that. And then we've got NVIDIA and Omniverse as well, and Amazon Web Services. And then on top of that too, and maybe even adjacent to a certain degree, you've got software and content services. So these are some existing players that we all are familiar with, like LexisNexis, Salesforce and Zoom. And for those of you who have a paid subscription to Zoom, that they have really blown up in some of their features over the past couple of weeks, and then there are also some new players coming online too, some emergent players that we need to pay attention to. And then there are the developers, and this space is pretty chaotic. This is where you have different types of specialized or novel large language models that are being created, focusing on on certain types of specialties, specific types of functions in specific domains. And these are oftentimes independent developers, and these developers may also be developing various types of plugins that work with some of the large language model chats, for example. As well as different types of APIs that they're developing, various AI based applications, integrations, and so you've got folks who might be working through LangChain, to create a series of different functional to basically chaining functional tasks. So you not only have one type of AI that you're working with, but you can actually chain different types of AI as a part of a workflow, so that you begin with a set of questions, but now it's executing a number of different functions over a number of different types of data sets using different types of tools, but it's all automated and it gives you an end state. And so that's something else that we need to pay attention to as CI practitioners, because it's not just about using ChatGPT and seeing what it can do. It's about all of this ecosystem and saying, what does this mean to my CI practice? How are CI practitioners and others going to shape this? Perhaps some of them are developers creating something commercial, creating something open source, or a lot of bespoke DIY in-house tools that are being created. And then you also see too that there are a number of different players, and I mentioned LangChain already, but you've got libraries and clearinghouses that collect a number of these types of platforms and different types of services that you can find, and many of them are open source. And so Hugging Face is one that IBM has partnered with to be able to create their own development services using chaining. And GitHub is one where it's a sandbox that's now Microsoft owned, of course, but that's where developers play. So if you really want to get an early sense of what's going on, or even technical support, that's a great place. Around all this, the wrapper around all this is researchers. And this can't be underestimated. If you're looking to pick up on signals, understand what's going on, it's the folks who are conducting academic research and publishing. They're doing a lot of open source work that actually is very disruptive to the commercial players that you see at the bottom here. And in fact, actually, Alpaca, Orca, and Gorilla that you see at the bottom here are open source. And each one of these are smaller models that have created, that have actually worked on solving some sticky problems in terms of training costs and training time, use of APIs, also managing hallucinations, as in the case of Gorilla. And then we have on the other side various types of aggregators. So it's not just a matter of getting a ChatGPT account and going into the going into their portal, but now you can use tools like Jasper AI or Replicate, and through your account there, you can search multiple LLMs, and that's also very useful if you need to verify. If you think that one is hallucinating, you can maybe ask another, and so on. So there are some slight efficiencies that are happening here, for us to consider. So that's how you manage that landscape. Now, so since March, however, there have been a lot of changes. As I've already alluded to, there are expanded LLMs, as well as features and capabilities, just many more that have come online. And ChatGPT-4 itself, is, even though it was in development last fall, it really became, it came to popular use in this past spring, and it's 10 times more advanced than GPT 3.5, and it also offers plugins, and that's significant, and I'll talk more about that later. And all of this is really fueled by a competition, certainly among the key players there, and also VC funding that's being thrown at it, and also, in no small matter, the increasing open source. So folks might be taking the Llama model, or Llama 2, that's been that's been created by Meta, and they are creating smaller types of models that are that are more specialized, or that are working on on penetrating some of the barriers that we have identified very early on, like costs, like hallucinations, and so forth. And there are also, as I mentioned in the previous slide, there are more robust integrations now. It's just not a matter of say, hey, I'm working with this particular AI tool. It's more like, hey, how can we design maybe a series of AI tools that will work together through a workflow and automate this, so that so that we can just run it right on through if it's something that's already iterative to us. Say, for example, you want to do some market analysis, or social media analysis, or perhaps even competitor analysis. You can use these types of tools to stitch together different types of AI tools to be able to make this more automatable. Now, this requires the use of developers to help you do this for the most part, unless you already understand Python coding. But it's but for many people, you already have folks who already do this within your own organization, if you don't have an centralized AI team by now, if you're in a larger enterprise. And there's also the expansion of the developer community, so a lot of folks are throwing their hats into it, so that creates a lot of noise, but it's also just a lot of potential solutions for us to pay attention to. And then we can't ignore that generative AI is being married with other types of AI. So robotics, predictive AI, various types of other types of machine learning, to create more robust models, and also using generative AI to be able to create AI enhancements, right, to create new AI products and tools. So that's something else that that's also begun. And a lot of it too is really about minimizing the barriers that we're already seeing from a practical perspective for us. And so I've outlined some barriers and key barriers here that we're already well aware of. And so here what we've got are barriers within the model, right? So we have issues of memory, because a lot of the AI tools, say for example, if you're using ChatGPT, there are only a certain number of tokens or words, and tokens are fractions of words, that the system uses to actually process your query, but or your prompt, but models at this point, the large language models can for cost purposes, and so it could basically handle there's a certain set of a volume of memory, and then it starts to fall apart. And as many of you might have run into that if you're asking some very, very robust types of questions of that system, and you'll see that it might just outright reject it, or it might forget. So that becomes an issue. Hallucinations is one too, where, as most of you already know, it basically will come up, with an answer, even if it's not the correct answer, because it's basically designed to look for answers, so to speak. Various types of costs that are associated with it in terms of training, in terms of even data hygiene, for example, and just operating it, just prompting and using the AI tools is tremendously expensive. And so you literally see the fractions of nickel and diming that some power users are already engaged in certain types of certain tiers of accounts, but also issues of accuracy as well. And then, of course, with I already mentioned, data hygiene being some of the issues. Data is also an issue too, because people struggle with it, not understanding. Well, the understanding is that folks might say, well, we need a lot of data, and some of the smaller models based on some of the open source large language models are starting to prove that you don't. And so Alpaca, for example, out of Stanford, has done that. And that was one of the earlier ones that showed that you really don't need large sets of data to be able to train these models effectively. And so that's to begin to happen. But also the volume and pace of developments is also an issue. Then you have within organizations knowledge, skills, and abilities, various types of practices and rules that may be disrupted if you incorporate AI, or certainly robust AI. And then the organizational structure too may also create inherent barriers, various types of cultures within the organization as well. The mindset, vision are also limiters. So these are the things that we need to be paying attention to as practitioners when we're analyzing AI in other organizations, but also trying to understand where our AI is headed and how we can use it. And so as we look at this, I've color coded this for sure. And, the green is that, we're making some good progress there. Volume and pace, I'm not as optimistic about. I think it's going to worsen to a certain degree before it all shakes out, if it will. And then what's in gray is really gray areas. It's really dependent on organizations and how we can manage these various aspects. That will determine whether or not we're able to harness AI effectively. And so some recent developments, generally speaking, is that we have minimized hallucinations, we've reduced hallucinations, reduced costs, increased accuracy, and also increased our ability to harness data. But also there are some other issues too regarding data that gets very tricky for folks, because it requires really more the knowledge, skills, and abilities in data science to be able to manage some of this. And so people sometimes are finding that is a barrier to be able to understand where to go to next. And as I mentioned already, there are expanded functions, various types of specialized data. Now, and one thing I want to highlight too is the point at the very bottom, which is the increase in intersections. AI really is almost everywhere, it seems. And so where there are intersections is really where we need to be paying attention. And so for between AI in specific industries and specific functions, specific types of technology and so forth, that's where those innovations should be, right? To call back to the book, The Medici Effect. So the signals are really going to be coming out of there, and that's where we need to occupy. So here's just a summary of some things that I'm gonna gloss over these things, but I just, like I said, I codified some of these things so that if there is anything of interest, you can come back, loop back to me, or you can pop it up in here, and I'm happy to drill more deeply. But some of the things we can look forward to is that we're going to be looking forward to an expansion of more advancements. That's just not going to stop. More robust and specialized LLMs. Google has already announced that with their new AI, Gemini, they're going to be expanding into specialized medical AI as well as cybersecurity. So those are all very specialized verticals within the AI space. And so see more of that. because that means that we can increase accuracy. You can train on something that's more targeted rather than and train and tune something that's more targeted rather than more broad based. And you can also target to specific needs within in certain practice spaces and industries and so forth. Now there will also be increased tokens in memory. So some of the memory limiters, they say you can only input certain amount of text in the prompt before the system doesn't support it. And also you can also engage per session very oftentimes for a certain amount of tokens or text. And so that's the memory that will begin to expand. And in fact, just this week, one of the large language models it announced a significant expansion. I think it was just a couple of days ago. So which is everything when it comes to competition, when it comes to our being able to leverage these models. There are continual advancements in prompt engineering and prompt tuning. So that's also something to pay attention to. And I've begun to develop courses in that as well, because this is a subspecialty. So I urge you, if you can't if you can't seem to understand a particular large language model, or you're not getting the types of results, explore enhancing your prompt engineering capabilities, because a lot of it is still very, very clunky. It's not as intuitive. It's not like a search engine. And so there are a number of different techniques and considerations that you have to apply in advance of some of the commercial vendors creating more intuitive tools. And that's happening. That's begun to happen, but we're not quite there yet. And then also, don't forget search engine integrations. Bing, if you're searching Bing and it's AI enabled, you're searching ChatGPT-4. And you get 30 prompts a day. There are 30 prompts or searches a day, and you also get citations, which you don't get if you use like ChatGPT-4, right? Chrome also has that as well, or Google, I should say. And then with generative AI, just think about how that combines with almost everything, because that's one of the ways that we can stretch our mindset. So some of the things that I want to highlight too is also just focusing on ChatGPT Plus. I'm not playing favorites. It's just that this is in conversation, right? Because I think it's very important to be platform agnostic when we're evaluating these things. But as I mentioned, it's more robust than 3.5. If you are using the free version, you're really limiting yourself. And so I wouldn't evaluate your CI practices against the ChatGPT 3.5, even in its turbo form. And if you are looking to expand and adopt ChatGPT, you've got to be looking at 4.0. Otherwise, you're hobbling yourself tremendously, because in terms of information synthesis, languages, creativity, but also the various types of plugins. There are plugins that are in place, and not just the shopping ones and all the fun stuff, but you've got Wolfram Alpha, for example, that can handle data analysis, and others that handle graphic and charting fairly well. A number of the plugins, if you're using ChatGPT Plus, it gives you document summaries and video summaries that can help shortcut some of the process. Now, of course, hallucinations is an issue. You still need to ensure that that you're double checking, but certainly you can get some highlights, and then follow up on these things. And then you've got the beta plugins, and that's actually this is actually one of the areas I'm most excited about. If you have not tried this already, you really should be trying the beta version of advanced data analysis. I absolutely hate this new name. It used to be called Code Interpreter, and there's a big frenzy about it over June and July, when people were in beta, and then the public release. And but basically, what this can do is it can take data sets and various types of spreadsheets, and you can ask it to chart without specifying any specific type of chart, and it can read the chart and chart for you. Or you can specify the specific type of chart, and when you get the results, you can also specify, hey, I want to change the color coding, I want to change the labels, and so forth. You can interact with it as you would interact with an Excel spreadsheet, except this is scripting for you in Python, and you can get the script as well. I have also used this to convert file formats. And I did this actually in converting some graphical files and enhancing those files, and then converting various types of document formats as well, and doing it in a batch way. You can actually upload the document or link the document to ChatGPT Plus using advanced data analysis, and it'll run that for you, and then it will give you the final product, the link, and the code. So you really should be playing in that sandbox if this is something that if you're willing to kind of work on the leading edge. It's multimodal, multilingual now, more so than 3.5, and there's more customizations. So this really is in many ways a very different product. So if you think that ChatGPT is useless because of your opinion on 3.5, look at GPT Plus. And certainly for anything, I wouldn't use it for anything that is short-term research, is short-term turnaround and short-term needs, but anything that, say, for example, you're tracking over time, for which you have some time to validate and to observe, say early warning purposes, this is something that you may want to consider. And so the other thing that we want to do is we want to understand too how we can minimize hallucinations. And you can do this on the back end, and this is what developers are working on too, through training and fine tuning. And so they're using RLHF, which is using human feedback for this, and to great effects. The Gorilla model itself is taking more advanced use of application program interfaces, or APIs, and through that innovation, they are able to minimize hallucinations. I forget if it's like 30 or 40%. I've got so many numbers from AI running through my head right now, but it's significant. And so, that's really just within the past couple of months. So this is how rapidly things are moving. So whatever you thought of some of these tools back in March, April, or May, have really, have really, in some cases, advanced so much, over the course of this summer. And I think that helps to underscore how rapidly things are moving. And then on the user end, right, to be able to help manage hallucinations, prompt engineering and requesting step-by-step thinking, for example, managing different types of inputs, that you put in as well, not just in terms of the uploads. So I mentioned that you can do more with Chat GPT Plus, and then just even combining GPT Plus with the Wolfram Alpha plugin, which contains a lot more general knowledge, as well as scientific and mathematical capabilities as well. So that's that's better for analysis. And then you can certainly consult more reliable and alternative LLMs. So you can search, you can post your prompts in one LLM and try another one, because we have that option now, which we really didn't have back in March. And so now let's take a look at AI for CI here. And I'm going to breeze through this rather quickly, because I'm assuming we're all Intel practitioners here, or at least we understand what CI is. But here with generative AI, it's really about efficiency versus accuracy. We have to understand that we're not going to achieve accuracy here. We need that human layer. But this is about efficiency at this point, given where we are. And so with Intel and Insights, certainly we can help with the Intel process itself within research and analysis. There are various types of tools. There's various types of productivity tools that we can use to collect Intel within the organization, and more to come, because as Microsoft Copilot and as Google start to incorporate AI into their workspace and also in their documents, we're going to see a lot more of these productivity tools happening, and even intuitively, it seems. And then also for program management, Intel program management, right? Again, the Intel process itself, and updating your competencies and professional development becomes very, very important, because new ways of thinking about the competitive space, right, with AI competencies, and then new ways of being able to practice competitive intelligence and conducting research and analysis. And then also digital strategy alignment too, and understanding what that is in your organization, in your competitors, and then paying attention to various industry developments and macro environmental developments too, in terms of the broader technological innovations, as well as social, governmental, political pressures that may be put upon this, and legal as well. And so it's really important for us, here as we're evaluating AI tools and platforms to understand the landscape. So that's how we started here. But understanding too, there's little value in the free services right now. And I'm talking about really more of the chat generative AI services. The quality, the time they have to put in, the accuracy is just too low. So I would even say, I wouldn't even bother looking at ChatGPT 3.5 if I'm conducting any type of analysis. I'm moving towards whatever the most robust version is. Because when we look at comparing ChatGPT versus ChatGPT plus, I put 4 here because, but that's the LLM. But it's really, in many ways, it's comparing apples and oranges. It's just, they're, to me, for Intel purposes, they're different products. And also looking at the various types of enterprise platforms. Some of you may be a part of organizations, large enterprises that have been already using Microsoft Copilot. And some of you, may be adopting them soon. So that's something really to think about, because the productivity is going to be enhanced there, and the ability to be able to harness internal data and explicit, and even to some degree tacit, if you can manage that well enough, tacit knowledge, it becomes enhanced. And in thinking about the specialized large language models and plugins that will come online too. So it's not necessarily that you're going to have one particular model that you're using, but maybe a suite of them. So a lot of it could be very well customized. And then just be aware of vendor hype and so forth. And we've all been there with the AI, with the knowledge management, KM tools hype, and also before that, the .com boom. So here is the Intel model. I'm sure you live and breathe this. But I just highlighted a couple of things here for you to think about in terms of incorporating these tools and what these tools can do within these functions, right? So for needs analysis, these could be interesting tools for generating ideas, issues, and kits through prompting. Maybe looking at using you're using competing hypotheses here as well. Now, you'll see that I noted Google Gemini in a question mark because it's not available yet. But the discussions around its capabilities means that it's going to be probably the most robust tool available for business analysis. And its capabilities are promising to be much more enhanced. So that's got to be on our radar when it comes online, probably in October. But certainly this fall. For planning and direction, it's still very much limited. But again, Google Gemini, it's promising that it can assist with planning. And so that's something to think about. And then with published sources, what we have here is document and video summaries. So if you have large troves of PDFs or Word docs, various types of studies and research, a lot of innovations happening in the scholarly research space, and so asking for summaries of those documents, could help you cover a lot of territory. Multilingual support also available there. For human sources, not a whole lot in terms of generation, but for transcript editing, summaries, and synthesis becomes very important. And in this case too, you'll notice I noted that you need to set the AI temperature. And basically the temperature is a particular feature that these tools have. The parameters are set between the number 0 and 1, and in decimals in between, where 0 is more precise and 1 is more creative. And so when we talk about how, oh, this model is more creative and that one is more precise, oftentimes we're really talking about toggling within the temperature, and you can actually do that. So if you're not prompting and setting your temperature accordingly, you may be skewing on the side of creative when you need actually more accuracy. And so that's something you need to also think about. Some tools like Bing actually allows you to toggle, and they don't call it temperature. I think they call it creative and precise, if I remember, creative and accuracy. And so it's a slider that you use, but that you're basically playing with the temperature. So if you are asking it to write for you, you need to be setting the proper temperature. And I'm happy to talk more about that, maybe in a different setting, in a different session, or off, or offline. And so, and for analysis and reporting, you've got ChatGPT plus plugins like advanced data analysis or Wolfram, as I mentioned, that can help you with visualizing data. And so, and one other thing is dissemination. yeah, it's still up to us. So the human element matters. And by the way, in the middle, very important, agents, integrations, and frameworks. These are the different types of tools that can stitch together, right, the various types of functions that we see here. So within published in open sources, we may be able to you may be able to stitch together where it's searching on specific types of documents, but now you've got different document sets that you and data sets that you're searching on separately, and then you synthesize, and you can actually stitch that and automate that through different types of integrations and frameworks. And that does exist now. It takes development, but that is a capability through the current tools. So think about that. I'm not going to go into this in detail, but this is just a sort of a higher level basic chart that I put together, looking at different types of LLMs and their training date, their training parameters, their memory and context, how much memory they can support within a session, input token limits, so how much can you actually input in your prompts, the types of responses or response issues that they tend to generate, the best uses, and how you might be able to access that particular large language model. So for example, here for GPT-4, you access it through OpenAI Chat GPT Plus or via Bing. And then here with Llama 2, you can access that through some of the aggregators like Jasper or Replicate and so on. And then you've got the different modes. So is it purely text? Is it multimodal where it can support graphics and video, different types of language and so on? Now this is just very basic. There's a lot more details. I left out privacy and security, right, and other types of functions that are important for CI purposes. But I just want to help you understand that I think it's very important to maintain something like this for your team if you're trying to during this transition stage understand which tools are useful for you, and then also which are free and free. In fact, just a couple of days ago, maybe even yesterday, I think it's been a bit of a blur, Anthropic announced that they're launching Claude Pro, which is their free version that competes directly with GPT-4. So things are moving quickly. Whoops. So here, whoops. Okay. So here, what we've got is, whoops. Oh, I'm sorry about this. This is acting a little wonky. All right. So maximizing ChatGPT, I've just summarized some things that we've already talked about. But one thing I do want to mention too is you can manage your search history. You can actually delete that. So that has been a bit of a concern for people in the past. And so I just want to highlight that as a development since March, based on concerns. But other things that I want to mention too is that there are other types of plugins. Prompt Perfect allows you, it helps guide you through prompts. So if you don't understand prompt engineering, it can help you with that. And there are other types of tools that are really worth looking at as well. And this is just the highlights. So just start playing around with it. Other things to think about too, it just highlights prompt engineering. I'm not going to go into this, but just throw some concepts at you here, where there have been innovations in terms of different prompt methods. Moving from chain of thought, which is just creating chains of thoughts, to tree of thought methods. And there have been research papers written on this. People have actually been playing with this out in the wild to good effects, to more accurate effects. So it does improve accuracy and efficiency. Applying temperature, as I mentioned, frequency penalties and other controls. And again, I'm happy to dive into this later. Personalizing settings, rephrasing, and other techniques. And also asking ChatGPT to output in smaller increments can help improve your accuracy because it gets less confused. It doesn't tax its memory. So these are types of things that we've learned since March. And then some things too is, let's think about, AI for intelligence production. Coming down the line. So we can break that down into the ecosystem. And so here I just listed some of these things. And again, I'm not going to go into it, too much, just kind of throwing some ideas out, and we can certainly use that for points of discussion, as well as future conversations as well. But things like the use of synthetic data that I haven't mentioned yet in this session, where oftentimes we can't get real data for privacy reasons. Perhaps it's also for regulatory reasons out in EU. So or perhaps it's just very expensive, right, to collect actual data. And so synthetic data is actually being used in whole or in part, because sometimes it's partially, it's a hybrid approach, to be able to help train these models. And so we can expect that that is going to just to begin to expand a little bit too, with all of its attendant benefits and risks or concerns. There will be more open source options and DIY. So so for those of you who are interested in that area, or you have internal partners in your own organizations that you can work with to help you create something bespoke for your own team or your own organization, and some of it may already be underway, because certainly IBM and Palantir are working with, the private sector, not only in terms of using their proprietary products and models, but they're also, IBM has partnered with Hugging Face, to use open source to be able to expand, their capabilities in creating, chained applications, and so think more in terms of that. Think also enterprise. One of the reasons why I have not focused on CI products and services is because I really think that we're moving away from the traditional models. We're going to be breaking through data silos. And so many of these enterprise tools are going to search across various types of data pools and creating data lakes, or tapping into data lakes within your own organization. And so that is actually going to create more robust and insightful AI ultimately. It's not to say that there won't be specialized CI tools that will be created, but they don't exist now, so I'm not covering it. And then also all of this too means that on the end user side, there will be more on-demand intel, for better or for worse. So there's a lot of discussion in our space too. Hey, you can't replace the human analyst and so forth. I agree, but will the end user agree? And in that, I think that that's an argument, or it's a case that we need to advocate for. And we can only do that if we understand how these tools work and don't work, and how we might be able to use and adopt AI to be able to enhance our understanding, so that we can show that with human intervention, we can make these tools better. And so that also earns the trust of our users. And so perhaps we lean into on-demand intel, but we are the ones helping to design and shape it at the back end. And to create a much better, accurate experience. So these are things we need to be thinking about. There's also increased mis and disinformation, and we're all well aware of that, but we all haven't really been thinking about how we specifically want to manage that. And that is something we need to also spend more time talking about. And then we also have technological developments as well. I'm not going to go too much into this, because again, it's another discussion, but just know that there are a number of different advancements from the hardware side, to just within the LLM space. And for a lot of folks who say that, hey, these generative tools aren't great for analysis. Well, I want you to focus on the last bullet point, which is there's going to be more focus on developments in auto encoding models or natural language processing for business analysis. And the upcoming Google Gemini is really looking like that is that's going to be a tool that is going to do that. So it's not just going to be working on one aspect of generative AI, but it's really going to be working on encoding and decoding and creating something that's much more robust, and it's going to incorporate other aspects like natural language processing. So it's not just about the various specific subset of encoding and decoding, either or model, but it's really going to be, okay, we're going to do a number of these different things and enable them together to make a more robust product. Okay, so that's really on the horizon. So Google DeepMind, you've already heard me mention this, right? So it's new architecture, and in doing this, some of you had heard about AlphaGo and how it beat humans playing the Asian game Go, and so basically it's basically marrying the capabilities of AlphaGo with generative AI. So this is a whole new thing, and I've listed some of the potential anticipated enhancements, and it's going to have 1 trillion parameters that it's also trained on. So that really puts it in competition with a Claude 2, a large language model, which right now is the leader in training parameters, and then various types of integration with Google Workspace. So you're not necessarily going to see it working, right? Because it could just be embedded in your workflow. And so keep an eye on that. Another thing I want to highlight too is looking at Porter's 5 forces model. When we're looking at AI, as a subject matter for CI analysis is, when we were assessing the power of suppliers and power of buyers, it's really about the amount of information that each of these entities have. AI, if it's enabled, increases the amount of information that entity has. So when we're assessing the power along this the supply and distribution chain, now we need to understand how AI increases the information and who has more information and insights. So that's something I want to highlight. The other thing is AI supporting the new entrants, because new entrants are going to be leaner and more agile. They don't necessarily need as much overhead in terms of capital and carrying staff and building infrastructure and so forth. So potentially new entrants can come in and be somewhat of a disruptor. And you've got the threat of substitute products as well, and that's where the real disruption happens. And so we've got to be thinking in terms of time horizons here for sure, but pay attention to the various signals in each of these areas. So we need to adjust the way we look at things, even using Porter's 5 forces model or Ben-Susan and Fleischer's 9 forces model as well, if we want to bring in the macro environment. And then here, basically, we're just looking at the cone of uncertainty, but we're just projecting outward. And you've got here breakthrough events and also breakdowns that might occur over time from going into the future. And so here, I just this is a tool that I put together to help you anticipate and monitor for signals. And some areas that you need to monitor would be things like edge AI activities, where they're happening on the fringe of companies. Companies are not adopting AI essentially, but they're just kind of playing around with it on the edge to see how it's working before they bring it in or before they spin it off. And Google's AI, Google Brain is actually a great example of that. And then they used the products of Brain and DeepMind to then enhance their search engine. Various specialized models, integrated cloud and enterprise solutions, all are going to be enhanced. AI integrations and intersections, and also open source AI as well. Now, breakdowns, various types of automated tasks. So the way we search right now using search engines, and also even searching various types of aggregator tools right now, it's going to change, and it's not going to be what we recognize. Data silos, same thing. I mentioned, data lakes, data warehouses, or even lake houses, which are hybrids of that. That is going to replace the silos. Legacy processes and systems, as well as we incorporate more AI to help reshape the rules within organizations and rules and processes within organizations. These are things we want to look out for and to monitor for. So for this session, what recommendations? I just outlined some top 10s here. Some of them are pretty obvious, like, understanding key concepts and minding your gaps, but also consult AI benchmarks, number 5. AI benchmarks are particularly important because that's how we assess tools. And so that's happening right now mostly on against large language models when you're benchmarking each other, but we need to start doing that within CI as well. And we have a transition plan, number 7. Because as we're moving towards something that's brand new that could be potentially disruptive in your own organization, think about what is not automatable, what is automatable, how you're going to make your case, look for opportunities to be able to enhance your own practices, and help to shape your organization as well, through guidance and leadership. And you need to do that by understanding your organization's digital strategy, and that's number 8. So really, I think that the important ones, are the later ones at the end here, that are more applicable. So I really encourage you to do that. And again, this is a lot to embrace all at once, but this is the time to think about this and start to lay out your plan, start to think about how your various types of practices and use policies and transitions and alignments and so forth. so that you're not caught short next year or the year after. Next year will be a very big year because a lot of the enterprise models are going to be launched. There will be a lot more tools and integrations, and you're going to see a more robust adoptions. This is the year in which people are just kind of mulling things over, but I'm working with companies right now where they're preparing for next year. So think about that. Be proactive, be deliberate. And then here too, don't forget the human elements for us to take action on. And some of these we've already talked about. But I want to highlight actually number 5, because this is actually an inherent barrier in us. And I find that a lot of my practitioner colleagues are kind of stuck in older ways of thinking. And we need to encourage each other to make these leaps as well. So I want to just highlight that, and then some things, staying on top of signals. And I've just highlighted some areas to pay attention to. I'm happy to name names offline if you need to, but one thing I do want to also point out too is that we need to get outside of CI, to be able to track what is actually happening. And so looking at journalists and thought leaders in these various spaces is important. Archive actually has a lot of sort of preprint peer review that can give you great signals on what's to come if you have to stay on top of this for industry purposes. And then for monitoring and early warning purposes, go beyond alerts. You can actually begin to start using some of these AI tools, to create summaries for documents, videos, and websites, and prompt templates. So you start moving towards those. And here, what I've got is, Hugging Face, their website, as I mentioned, it's an aggregate, it's a libraries of different types of models. So you can you can access these models here, but you can see here that they organize it for you. So if you want to get to know, okay, who's who, what's what under these categories, this is another way of doing it in a more technical space. And then they also have a leaderboard that they track of, what people are downloading. And what developers are using right now. So that also helps you pick up on various signals, false signals as well, because the hype is a part of that. But anyway, but know your industry and your AI leaders. Understand AI's impact on your strategy. Adapt. Make AI a subspecialty if you want to transform your practices and be a part of the next wave. And then think about how you're going to adopt AI by applying current tools, adopting LLM-based tools. And then think about the DIY development as well for those of you who have access to technical resources. That's really where a lot of the work is right now, because a lot of the current tools and LLM-based tools are still pretty clunky. I think certainly in the next 3 years, we'll see a lot more, and it'll be a lot easier on the user interface side. But right now, it really is very much more of a DIY and third-party implementation environment. So with this, I'm going to take some questions, and I know that we're tight on time, but I think that if you would like to, let's see, yeah. So if you would like to, post some questions to me in the chat, or I could actually even open up this discussion because we do have this as a meeting. We can spend the next few minutes with this. So just unmute yourselves and let's talk about what your thoughts are, what your observations are. We've got some CI fellows here who are also technically inclined with us. So certainly we welcome their input too. But everybody has important perspective here because we're all the eyes and ears. We have one question. Can the advanced data analysis plugin be added to the Bing version? No, that is purely the ChatGPT Plus, and it's in beta at this point. Bing is very much Bing. It's a Microsoft product. So because they are an investor in OpenAI, they have access to GPT-4. So that's why Bing is using GPT-4. And Bing is, I like to use GPT-4 actually. I'm sorry, Bing in addition to GPT-4, because I can prompt GPT-4, then go to Bing, and then Bing will give me some citations. So I can compare and contrast and get the sourcing, whereas I can't necessarily get that from GPT-4. So I also have a question about whether the recording and the slides will be sent after. So yes, I will be happy to send slides for those of you who who are interested in that. I'll have my contact information at the end as well. Let's see. And yeah, more talk
Cynthia,
about sharing the recording and so on. Now, any of the thoughts or perspectives? I know I just basically turned on the fire hose.
Cynthia, hi, this is Mark Little.
Hey,
Can you hear
Mark.
me? How are
Very
you?
well. Good to see you too.
Again, you're a superstar. Thank you for the presentation. From time to time, I do surveys, and one of the things that I worry about, and you said it so succinctly, you said something like, we know how important the CI analyst is, but will our end user understand that? So how do we go about educating the end user of how this all fits together with already a function that's not really well understood? So, I mean, how, we could easily be replaced if we don't create the value behind the CI analyst.
Spot on question. And in fact, this is how we work with our clients. So the clients that I'm working with right now, basically, they're coming to us with questions and saying, what does this mean? And so what we do is we help them answer those questions. And it's as simple as that. But there are also sets of users who aren't asking the questions or asking us the questions. And maybe perhaps they're asking the technical teams the question and they're not paying attention to necessarily the development space. And actually, I've encountered companies that have done that, who they've basically said, oh, this is all hype, there's nothing to this, we're basically just tuning out. And these are executives saying this, and they're tapping into their technical teams, because their technical teams aren't necessarily paying attention to the developer space and the competitor space, because as I mentioned, as I highlighted here, it's changing so rapidly. And so many of them aren't necessarily aware that these spaces exist, and these are IT folks. So it's incumbent on us to now bring these questions to our users. So then this is a part of the needs analysis that we conduct as Intel practitioners, right? Where we're not necessarily expecting them to come to us with the key intelligence topics or questions, but we're the ones who are saying, hey, we're noticing these changes, we're noticing these trends, we're hearing this buzz. Thought leaders are saying this, and this, or you use some of the slides, that I've presented here today to say, here, within this, cone of uncertainty, looking out over the next 5 years, we see these developments happening in terms of the breakthroughs and the breakdowns that you just saw. Create your own, and bring those to your users and engage in conversations about that. The clients and prospects that we have that we've been speaking with are really struggling with this question. And many of these are large enterprises with centralized AI functions, and some of them are actually partnered with some of these larger entities. They're using IBM and Google, and they still have a lot of questions. Because perhaps there are some silos. You might have specific teams that are struggling with it, even if the more centralized, AI is developing something for the enterprise. So you have, those barriers within the organization, and they're not talking to each other. That's inherently a problem as well. So from an AI and knowledge management perspective, that's an opportunity for us to say, hey, best practices here. We've got to get them talking if we want to enable this, this enterprise tool to be able to, work optimally across functions. We can't neglect key functions, especially knowledge-based functions like CI. So it's very, very important for us to understand that. And one of the recommendation slides, I also mentioned conducting an audit. And this is where, when you conduct that audit, Mark, you can ask your users as a part of your audit what their questions are regarding AI. So that surfaces the things that are keeping them up at night, or maybe just the things they're wondering about. And then you can use that as a springboard for subsequent discussions and incorporate your observations as well as thought leaders, observations and so on, to arrive at something that is more concrete over time. But this is iterative, and this will require a number of different tools. I didn't even cover any of the tools that I've used, from issue analysis tools, to hype cycle management tools, early warning tools, and so forth, that we really should be incorporating to try to harness what is happening and staying on top of this. So I hope that I answered your question, but it really is about talking to people. And the recommendation slide for human intelligence as well, it involves earning trust. And so this feeds right into that. So at this very early stage, start positioning yourself to gain that trust in the AI/CI, AI/insights, foresight space, so that they see that AI is and AI awareness is a part of our jobs, right? That is critical, as opposed to just waiting for them to ask the questions. You can't be reactive to this. So I hope I answered your questions. If I haven't, or if there are follow-ups, I'm happy to refine it. And then we also have a question here. Some AI tools will provide general information and no sources. How do you manage sources? Yeah. So in this case, Jean-Francois, I mentioned that with GPT-4, I'm sorry, GPT plus using GPT-4, I will search on that and see what answers I get. You can also now triangulate with other LLMs, but I'll also then bring it over to Bing and see what answers Bing gives me. And if there are overlapping answers that Bing gives me, Bing will give me the citation. And so that's where, and if you're using if you adjust the temperature to precision, then that also increases, your accuracy. And so that's one way that I've been doing it. So a lot of it right now is a bit patchwork. I really think that, really in the next couple of years, we will see this resolved within the model itself. But right now, it's really about, we all know how to triangulate already, validate, using human sources. Now we're doing it. We're just transferring that to LLMs at this point. And then the other thing I want to keep in mind too is that I'm more open, and I actually use generative AI for early warning and tracking purposes, because there's a longer runway. That's tremendously important, because even if I were to get the wrong answer, some off-base answer during my early warning monitoring, because my time horizon and my runway is much broader than if I had a project that has a 1 month or 2 month turnaround time, I will use these tools because I have more time to validate, and other signals will come in, to be able to tell me whether or not, this is, on the right track. So that's where understanding the use cases for these tools for specific types of CI activities and for specific time horizons is critical. It's important not to look at this as saying whether or not this is useful for CI or not useful for CI. It's for specific types of CI. So I think that's also an important point to make. A question here, direct messages. Are there document analysis and or data analysis spreadsheet plugins available via Bing? No. Again, these are really, you got to pay for it at this point. So it really is a matter of the fee-based products that will give you the plugins that enable you to do this at this point in a more robust fashion. Now, it's not to say, though, that in the developer space somewhere, someone hasn't created something that's useful. But to be honest, I haven't really dived into it because it's a morass. It's just too much for me to wade through. And so this is where, if people are doing this in a hive-like fashion and we discover this and we can share with one another, that is the way to go. I'm willing to bet that there are something in some of the sandboxes in GitHub and Hugging Face and elsewhere. But in terms of the large language models, no, that does not exist at this point. These are great questions. Any other questions that I can tackle right now? Or any perspectives you'd like to share, because we do have some thought leaders here. No? Okay. So I know that we have gone over time, so I apologize, but I'm counting on the fact that the recording will certainly help people catch up, because we've had a lot to cover over the 6-month time period. And I'm hoping that we can do this on a regular basis so that I won't have to cover as much. And we can do this more incrementally and help you pick up some signals over time. And in some ways that I'm doing that is creating actually a newsletter. And I'm thinking at this point it's going to be a monthly. It's part of sort of my informed branch of activities called the Insights Foresights Letter AI Edition. So if you're interested in that, I have my contact information in the following slides. If you're interested in more meetings and webinars like this, let me know, so that I can start thinking about topics, questions you'd like me to explore or to be able to help answer for you, do a deeper dive, that would be covered here, and what we haven't covered, happy to do that. Also, we really revamped our courses. I've been conducting CI training for over 20 years. And we revamped our courses not only to create the AI modules that are still in development in areas like prompt engineering for AI and managing AI processes and units, and so I'm sorry, for prompt engineering for CI, managing CI with AI and so forth, but also just in the traditional basic ways, basic elements of competitive intelligence. It really changes how we should look at various functions. So the way we teach even basic research functions, it's different now. So it changes everything. It changes our set of competencies as well. So that's what's next from my side in terms of my organization. And I'm still learning a lot too. Every week, the floodgates, come in with new developments, new signals, and gaining new insights too. We're working with our clients, with the questions that they're asking, the way that, they are defining specific use cases, are helping them define specific use cases and roadmap, understanding their maturity models, for example. These are the types of things that we're doing. So you're not alone. And a lot of large enterprises are also struggling with this. So it's very important. Oh, by the way, one other thing I want to leave you with is know who the AI leader is in your space. I mentioned this in another slide in writing, but if you don't have your sights on that entity or those entities, you have significant blind spots because their AI advancements, and it will be a tremendous competitive advantage to you because they're generating more data over time because of the early adoption, which will generate more insights and gather more data and so on and so forth. So in strategy, regarding AI, time really matters more than in traditional strategic approaches. And then I also want to highlight too, near and dear to me, the Council of Competitive Intelligence Fellows has their annual CI Summit on September 27th to 28th. And the topic is competitive intelligence, transforming for new realities. We get touching on these subjects and more. So the QR code is there, but you can also ping me for details. Registration's happening right now. So don't miss out on that because we really are talking about this and other leading edge topics that are covered nowhere else. There's my if you want more information about the publication that's coming out, informed@knowledgeinformed.com. And if you want to ping me, certainly my phone number and my contact information, my direct email is right there. So, and then for those of you, who don't know who I am, because I really just launched into this because this generally is an intimate space. Many of us already know each other and know of each other. There's my bio. I'm happy to answer more questions. And so with that, I want to thank you very much for joining me. And I hope that we will continue this conversation certainly in the near future and into the longer term, because this is just only going to continue to evolve. So thank you so much, everybody. And I hope you have a wonderful weekend.